This is Inside Story. Hello there, welcome to the program. I'm Nick Clark. A storm like no other. That's how Hurricane Beryl is being described as it batters the Caribbean. It's left devastation and destruction in its wake, and more is expected. Warnings about climate change and global warming are reported daily in media right around the world. But this storm's timing, its speed, and its intensity is causing concern among scientists globally. We'll find out more about both the local and the wider impact of Hurricane Beryl later in the program with our guests. And we'll take a closer look at the science behind this particular storm with our senior meteorologist, Rob McElwee. But first, let's have this report from Kulsum Sharif.
Hurricane Beryl is breaking records as it tears to the Caribbean. It made landfall on Grenada's Carriacou Island on Monday, flattening about 90% of homes. It's the strongest storm to hit the southeastern Caribbean in 2 decades.
To see this level of destruction, it is almost Armageddon-like, almost total damage or destruction of all buildings, whether they be public buildings, homes, or other private facilities. There is almost complete destruction of the electrical grid system in Carriacou. The entire communication system is completely destroyed.
Some people who lost their homes on Union Island, a tiny crop in the St. Vincent and the Grenadines archipelago, arrived in the Jamaican capital with tales of what it was like in the middle of the storm.
I survived in my tiled area because the top cast. It was a hard 4 hours battling.
You know like a movie, where you just have a lot of devastation. That is how you don't like. It's in a mess.
On Tuesday, Beryl weakened to a Category 4 storm, but remained destructive. Across the region, from the Dominican Republic to Cancun in Mexico, people rushed to stock up and take shelter. In Venezuela, the storm brought heavy rains to the northern state of Sucre. A river burst its banks, triggering floods. Several people have died or been reported missing.
There are 8,000 houses with various levels of damage. We've already responded. Civil protection teams are working with the army to document the damage. They told me at least 400 houses are completely lost.
Beryl is the first hurricane of the Atlantic season and the earliest storm on record to be classified as the maximum Category 5. National Weather Service planes are trying to gather data to understand more about Beryl's intensity and structure. Scientists cite man-made climate change for the storm's rapid strengthening, and there are warnings of an extraordinary season ahead. Kulsum Sharif, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
So what is the science behind this storm and what might just happen next? To explain, here's our senior meteorologist, Rob McElwee.
Beryl is a noteworthy major hurricane. You already know this much. Now, from the point of view of what it looks like from space, it's huge. It goes from the coast of Venezuela right up beyond Barbados and St. Lucia, both of which found the effects quite unpleasant. But the devastation was near the eye. It's a beautiful eye near Grenada. Now, in September, we'd think this is a major hurricane, happens every 20 years or so, and not surprising. But it's July, and there's the worry. It's a unique storm. It formed in June, became in 24 hours a Category 4 hurricane. That's never happened before. And it's the earliest Category 5 in July, with winds well in excess of 250 kilometers per hour. These are how they're categorized. It's the winds just around the inside of the eye, the strongest winds. There isn't a Category 6, so Category 5 will just go up and up as the storms get worse. Now, Beryl, of course, is fed like every tropical storm by the warmth of the surface water. And it is warmer in the Atlantic and the Caribbean by 2 or 3 degrees above the long-term averages. This isn't going to change. It might even get worse. It might get warmer still. So you're inserting more energy for every storm that forms. Hence, Beryl, early and major. And Beryl's still going, barreling through the Caribbean, which is warmer than normal, past Jamaica, still as a Category 4 storm, slowly losing energy as it goes further west, admittedly. But what does this say for our season? Well, in fact, the season was already forecast to be rather worse than normal. Could have up to 25 named storms, well above the average. Maybe 7 major hurricanes, that's category 3 or above. The average is 3. We've had 1 already. And the drivers are, as you know, the warmer water, which is everywhere, but certainly in the hurricane paths, and La Nina, which is the pendulum swing, almost the opposite of El Nino. It just adds more impetus, so the conditions are ripe for a very nasty season, and you've seen how it started.
All right, let's take this on. We can bring in our guest now in Orlando, in Florida. It's Daniel Guilford. He's a meteorologist and atmospheric scientist who focuses on how climate change affects hurricanes, heat, and local communities. Rhea Marie Pierre is in Bridgetown in Barbados, which has just been battered indeed by Hurricane Beryl. And she's the Caribbean delegation spokesperson for the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies and takes the technical lead on evolving crises and disasters. And Yeb Sanyo is in Manila. He's the Southeast Asia Executive Director of Greenpeace and a former climate negotiator for the Philippines government. A warm welcome to all of you. Let's go straight to the region first of all. Rhea Maria Pierre, you are deploying Red Cross personnel to get in and try and help with this catastrophic situation. What are your eyewitnesses saying about the severity of this hurricane?
So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all your viewers. I'm based here in Barbados, in Bridgetown, and I weathered the storm with the Barbadian population on Sunday into Monday morning. Here in Bridgetown, in Barbados, the devastation on the south coast in particular was immense. I mean, over 200 fishing vessels have been destroyed, over 20 boats sank. There was major damage to the port of Bridgetown. And then we also had damage to the fisheries industry. But even that synopsis pales in comparison to what we're seeing in Grenada. We have Red Cross staff and volunteers stationed in Grenada. And I mean, to live through that, the devastation is immense. As you saw earlier on in the program, Carriacou has been completely emaciated. 98% of an island is gone. The communications on Carriacou are still down. People are still trying to make contact with their friends and their families. Every building has not gone untouched. I mean, that's just 2. We have 8 countries that are in the path of Beryl. I mean, it's amazing to think about the destruction and the devastation in Union Island and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The communications are still down. The airport has been lost. Schools, churches, the main hospital, all destroyed. And it's keeping going. As we speak, Hurricane Beryl will be impacting Jamaica.
And the point is, Rhea, what we must absolutely emphasize here is that just how early this has come in the season, in what is predicted to be a very severe hurricane season.
I mean, it's July. The main part of the hurricane season, typically in the Caribbean, is around September into November and maybe the beginning of October. That's quite a ways away. We have more barrels to look forward to if we really take a look at the forecast. And we have to think about what these constant impacts on the region are having. It's the first storm of the season, and it has gone through 8 countries, projected to go through 8 countries so far. Is this really what we need to expect for the next few months in the region?
Okay, well, let's ask that question now to Daniel Guilford. Daniel, you grew up on the Florida coast, I understand, not so far from the Caribbean. You grew up observing big storms barreling in. As a climate scientist now, you also have deep knowledge of the climate systems. And now we have, as Rhea was just saying, the earliest Category 5 hurricane ever. How surprised are you at this, and how concerned are you for the season ahead?
Yeah, well, hurricanes are kind of like giant heat engines. They take energy from the ocean's surface, kind of like what Rob mentioned earlier, and they take it as fuel, convert it into wind speed. And so what we're seeing out there in the Atlantic right now are very warm sea surface temperatures, unseasonably warm. As you mentioned earlier, these conditions are kind of like what you would expect in September. And so this hurricane Beryl that is moving through is really seeing conditions that are unlike anything we've ever seen before. This unprecedented toll on the storm is having unprecedented impacts. And we are quite concerned. You know, it is only just July and we're seeing September-like impacts. So what does this mean for the rest of the season? Certainly the sea surface temperatures out there are remaining warm as long as African waves, these sort of disturbances in the atmosphere keep rolling off the African coast. We're going to have those warm waters, and there's plenty of fuel available for these storms to sort of develop and then begin to grow. So we are certainly concerned that, in line with many of the predictions out of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and other groups that have made predictions about the season, that it will be an extremely active one, and that this is probably not the end of the 2024 hurricane season. It's actually just the beginning. So we are concerned about what these impacts are, and we just are very cognizant that if you're along one of the coastlines in the Caribbean or the Gulf or even the eastern seaboard of the United States, this is going to be a time where you need to pay careful attention to what's happening in the tropics.
Daniel, just take this on a little bit further. You say that the warming ocean is a driver of these hurricanes. Why is it that warmer ocean temperatures fuel hurricanes and big storms and cyclones?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So a hurricane is almost like the engine in your car. As you push down the accelerator, fuel comes into your engine and starts to make it turn and speed up. And a hurricane is very similar. It needs some sort of fuel source. And on our planet, that fuel source is the warm ocean temperatures. We're seeing warm ocean temperatures that are quite a bit warmer than we would have seen this time of year in past years, something like 2 degrees Celsius warmer. And this can have big impacts on these hurricanes because you add more fuel to them, they can spin faster and faster. They have that opportunity to grow into the real monsters like the Hurricane Beryl that we're seeing right now. And so that fuel source is sticking around. Those warm ocean temperatures aren't going anywhere this season. And so we expect these hurricanes, as they begin to develop in this area, they can see that fuel source, they can take advantage of it, take that potential energy that is stored in the ocean and convert it into kinetic energy in the form of winds that can really provide a lot of the damages that we're seeing right now in the region. And so as we think about what's going to be happening going forward, a lot of this heat, as Rob mentioned, is here to stay. Climate change has sort of trapped more energy in the Earth's atmosphere. That energy eventually gets down into the ocean surface, which then provides a lot of warmth for these storms to be able to fuel up with. So this is something that is a major concern for us.
And it is climate change.
With human
Sorry to jump in there, Daniel.
It's
climate change is being fueled by fossil fuel emissions, creating a kind of blanket around the Earth. Yeb Sanyo, so what's being experienced in the Caribbean now is being experienced right around the world. Very familiar scene, of course, in the Philippines where you are. What are your thoughts about what we're seeing in the Caribbean in the context of the worsening effects of climate change, especially in the Philippines?
Yes, just watching the news coverage and listening to Rhea right now is certainly reminiscent of the series of devastating storms that we've seen for the past many years. And certainly the one that hit my hometown in Tacloban City, Super Typhoon Haiyan in 2013 and Super Typhoon Rai just 3 years ago, which indicates for us, most of these typhoons have become more destructive and carrying so much intensity. And it aligns with what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is saying around the more frequency of category 3 to 5 tropical storms. And that's very worrying. And I can only imagine the suffering that's happening in the Caribbean right now. I've seen it with my own eyes here where we live. And I can only really sympathize and pray for the best for those who are still struggling to pick up the pieces and racing against time to save lives and homes.
Rhea, what are the global discussions around climate change in relation to hurricanes like this? Are the voices of those countries, like those in the Caribbean and indeed in the Philippines and the Pacific, are those countries in the crosshairs of climate crises like these, are those voices being heard?
I think situations like this force Caribbean voices to be heard. How many more barrels are we going to have to live through? We have gone through Hurricane Maria and Irma in 2017. We had Hurricane Dorian in 2019. And now we're here again with Hurricane Beryl as the strongest hurricane to hit the region in 20 years, this early on. It forces the conversation. We are at the forefront of the climate crisis. We're no longer at the cusp of the climate crisis. We are living it, breathing it, experiencing it every single day. Our lives, our livelihoods are being impacted. I mean, how do we quantify some of the damage that we've seen? How do we quantify 98% of an island being destroyed? And it's not only one, it's more than one. We've seen it in Carriacou, we're seeing it in St. Vincent, the impacts in Barbados, in St. Lucia, in Jamaica, in Dominica, in Trinidad and Tobago. The list goes on. How long does the list have to grow before we take action and before we really start to listen to the voices of people who are at the forefront of this climate crisis? We need to have more spaces for our voices to be amplified and our voices to be heard, because how long are we expected to suffer the consequences of the climate crisis when we only contribute less than 10% to global carbon emissions?
Yeah, over to you. What are your thoughts?
Well, one of the biggest challenges we've faced in terms of finding lasting solutions to the climate crisis is obviously the fossil fuel industry that's at the core of this crisis. And the slowness by which the international community and nations take serious, ambitious action to avert this crisis. What we're seeing right now are examples of what will continue to happen in the future if we do not act urgently on this crisis. And what we have seen as a very difficult in these international negotiations is of course the vested interest that lie behind this big issue. I would also want to mention that the tricky part about storms when we talk about the climate crisis, it's only been more recent that the scientific community has made it very categorical that climate change is driving more intense storms. And this is pretty recent. So that's why the science of attribution, being able to push the political boundaries around climate action, has not been seen in recent times. And I think all of these climate extremes that are happening all over the world right now, not just storms, but also heat waves, should compel leaders to take action.
Daniel, the thing is, so you have all these climate extremes going on, like the Hurricane Beryl, but meanwhile, developed nations continue to subsidize fossil fuels to the tune of trillions of dollars a year. There's no real incentive for big oil and big gas to ease production. But if we continue to warm our planet in the way that we are doing, what does it mean for these weather events that are already reaching extremes?
Yeah, the climate system is going to respond in turn, right? More fossil fuels will mean that the temperature of the planet will continue to rise. And as the temperature of the planet rises, these impacts, like we're seeing extreme heat, hurricanes like Hurricane Beryl, which is being impacted already right now by climate change, will continue to be impacted. Climate change is here right now. It is impacting us in real ways. Real lives are being affected by these storms. So it is critical that we come together and work towards solutions to sort of solve the climate change problem that we are all collectively, the world, dealing with. And these things are expected to not change. We are going to have this heat with us for a long time. So in addition to mitigating our impacts, we're also going to have to adapt and change the way we live our lives to protect ourselves from the worst of impacts. So it's really important that we continue to have conversations with anyone and everyone who will listen, that climate change is here, it's happening, and we need to do everything we can to reduce its impacts.
But Daniel, we've been having those conversations for 20 years and more, going back in time, and action is not happening fast enough.
That's right. We need to make immediate changes right now. And one of the challenges, I think, is sometimes climate change can be a little abstract. It's far away. Maybe it's in somewhere else. But climate change we can see through Hurricane Beryl, the extreme heat waves, the extreme flooding we've been seeing around the world. It is happening right now. It's no longer an abstract thing. As was just mentioned, we now have the science to point to particular events and say, this was made worse by climate change, or this intense event was made made more likely because of climate change. The science supports that. And so what we need to really be doing is having our policy support solutions towards reducing our climate emissions and the climate impacts, hopefully going forward.
We're looking at pictures just a second ago of the Paris Agreement crossing the line back in 2015, which is almost 10 years ago. Ria, there's been a raft of elections across the world this year, yet the climate crisis has hardly been on the agenda. Not in the UK, not in the United States. Governments clearly believe it's not a vote winner.
At the end of the day, it is a hot topic issue. I think people necessarily don't want to, as we say, put their head on a block for what is being described, as Daniel just said, as abstract thoughts. But it's not abstract thoughts. We are living it every day. It's a reality. And we need to focus on the reality. We need to focus on accountability, because the climate crisis was not started by small island developing states, but we need to ensure that we protect the most vulnerable in our communities who are at the forefront of this climate crisis. We need to maybe stop being a little so politically correct about it. And we actually need, as we said, the conversation has been going on for 20 years. The time to take action was not now, it was then.
What do you mean by not be so politically correct?
From the standpoint of, we need to tackle the issues at hand, and we need to tackle the issues that are in front of us. We need to take the wool over our eyes off. We need to bring, like spaces like this do, bring a lot more awareness and clarity and vision to what is happening in the countries that are being affected by climate change, and put a human element to it, because it's the human element that suffers the most. And it's the human element that needs the support, as our colleague said, in terms of the policies and making the policies a reality. Because if we continue to sit on our hands, we're going to continue to have more barrels, we're going to continue to have more Dorians, we're going to continue to have more supercells. Okay. And we really need to start putting the human agenda at the forefront and the humanitarian agenda at the forefront, and to protect the lives and livelihoods of people who are routinely impacted every single season by these supercells.
Ria, I'm going to move on because we've only got 3 or 4 minutes left, and I want to come to both of our other guests. First of all, you mentioned the process. How do we make that more meaningful? And the question is, isn't the mechanism itself broken? The UN framework itself is just not working.
There are certain indications that we need to put pressure on the international process. It is, I would agree with you, a little bit broken, but it's our best option right now in terms of getting all countries to contribute towards meaningful solutions to the climate crisis. I would say every politician who doesn't talk about climate change is on the wrong side of history, and we will keep exposing these world leaders who are not addressing and confronting this crisis like they should as a crisis.
Daniel, despite it all, renewable energy is gaining ground. There is a growing demand, especially from youth movements around the world, for change. It's not too late, is it?
It's not too late. You know, that the fact that we're dealing with Daryl says that some impacts are already with us, but there's sort of a range of what impacts we could be seeing in the future. And if we reduce our fossil fuel emissions, our greenhouse gas emissions right now, we can sort of mitigate and reduce those impacts that we're going to be seeing going forward. And this is really good evidence. What's happening with Daryl right now is really good evidence that the climate system is already responding to the decisions we make. So that's actually kind of an interesting story, because it says that the decisions we make right now will affect going forward. And so it is critical that this moment we have these conversations, we continue to connect what we see happening in the real world to the decisions we are making about how we emit things, how we produce our energy. And it's critical that we think about that in this moment and make the decisions going forward that will protect both ourselves and future generations.
Yeah, but you have worked on both sides of the fence, from negotiating to activism. At this point in time, where do you find hope? Do you truly believe that we will get out of this?
Well, there are days when we confront hurricanes like Hurricane Beryl, and it leaves you just really totally uh, flustered and cynical. But we have to wake up each morning with hope, and hope is stronger than fear. And therefore, we should just keep believing that another world is possible, that we can make this happen. We can make the just energy transition possible in our generation, and create a world that is just, that is safe, and that is meaningfully equitable for everybody. This is about justice. This is about fairness. Those who are suffering from the most adverse impacts of the climate crisis are those who contributed the least to this problem. And therefore, if we have any faith in humanity, it's the faith in humanity that we will be able to find justice and resolve this crisis once and for all.
Let's finish in the region. Ria, at this difficult point in time for the Caribbean, it must be hard to find any optimism at all, isn't it? What are you thinking about the years ahead and how we tackle this crisis?
No, I have to agree with what Yen said. We can't allow ourselves to think like that. We have to be optimistic about the future. We have to work with the organizations like the Red Cross to support community development and community building efforts at that level, because the communities are our very first responders. So we need to invest in community resilience building and community preparedness so that we know what to do and we know how to adapt, and we're able to sort of chart a course forward for the future. We need to understand our risks and our vulnerabilities a lot better so that we are able to plan and prepare for them. And we have to do that with an open mind and with an open spirit to be able to accept the hope that's going forward. Because in the Caribbean, we are refusing to accept that this is going to be the be all and end all for us. We need to be able to be more resilient. And in order to do that, we have to have a positive outlook on the future.
All right. As they say, when, if not now, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks to our guests, Daniel Guilford, Ria Marie Pierre, and Nazareth Yebsano. Thank you very much. And thank you too for watching. You can see our programs again at any time by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And to continue the conversation, just go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also find us on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Nick Clark, and the whole team here, it's goodbye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.
Meet Asana, a work management platform that helps companies get more done and save more time. Teams can stay connected while they track updates and visualize timelines. Asana, a smarter way to work. Try it for free today at asana.com.
Rethink expectations. Rethink professional and small business insurance with Berksey. Coverage that's made to be easy, affordable, and better, so you can keep moving toward what's possible.
Hello, Namaskar. This is First Post, and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. It's good to be back. Thank you for staying with Vantage. Tonight, we start with the U.S. presidential election. After the debate debacle last week, will Joe Biden get the boot? Will the Democrats find a replacement for him? And who will that person be? We'll discuss all of that. In France, a political earthquake. Macron's gamble has backfired. The far right has made gains in the snap election. This could trigger the next Euro crisis. We will talk about the implications for Macron, for France, and for Europe. In the UK too, it's election week, and the top contenders are flocking to temples to get the Hindu vote. In Nigeria, women suicide bombers kill 18 people and injure many more. In India, a new set of laws comes into force, replacing those from the colonial era. We bring you the highlights, the improvements, and the concerns. In South Korea, the people want to impeach their president amid a growing threat of war with the North. In Kabul, as the Taliban's rift with Rawalpindi widens, they're trying to cozy up to India.